160 years ago today, a man you probably never heard of before organized the largest amphibious offensive of the American Civil War. This unsung hero found a way to transport the Army of the Potomac by sea to the gates of Richmond. And this was the initial landing zone. Zach and I are standing on the parapet of Fort Monroe. On the tip of the Virginia Peninsula, we are currently about 80 miles from Richmond.
I think we should take a moment to truly appreciate just how hard it would be to transport 100,000 men to this location by sea.
Yeah, and not just 100,000 men, Zach. You also got to account for all of the horses, all the supplies, all the equipment.
It's mind-boggling. To call this operation ambitious would be an understatement. It was a monumental logistical task never before attempted in American history, and the question is, how did it happen and who pulled it off? The answer is a man you've probably never heard of.
I think a lot of people assume it was George McClellan, the great organizer of the Army of the Potomac, that orchestrated this transport.
No, it actually fell to the Assistant Secretary of War, John Tucker. His boss, Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, is quite famous, but poor John Tucker never got the credit he deserved. In fact, we couldn't even find a period photograph of John Tucker.
Tucker's assignment in early 1862 was to figure out how to move the Army of the Potomac from its encampments around Washington, D.C. down to Fort Monroe. He immediately recognized this would require the use of several ports, and Tucker chose Washington, D.C., Annapolis, and Alexandria as his loading points.
And so the thing is, John Tucker was informed that he had only a month or less to get this done.
Nothing like working under pressure, huh, Zach?
He did well. He did it in 3 weeks. John Tucker delivered 121,500 men, 14,592 animals, 1,224 wagons, 264 pieces of artillery, and hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies to Fort Monroe, all in less than 3 weeks.
Tucker was smart enough to know he would need more than just U.S. Navy vessels, and he chartered any civilian ship he could find on the East Coast. In total, he employed 276 Navy ships and 113 civilian steamers. Those ships ran back and forth, up and down the Chesapeake, non-stop for weeks. And at the end of it all, not a single man was lost.
That's unbelievable. An incredible feat of logistics.
Yeah, and one for which John Tucker has never received proper credit. Tucker himself wrote in his report of the operation, quote, "For economy and celerity of movement, this expedition is without parallel on record." And honestly, I don't think it's hyperbole. I think he was right.
And more famously, a British writer who observed the operation called it a stride of a giant.
And it all began today, March 17th. Now, we already told you this naval transport to Fort Monroe will take 3 weeks to complete. But you won't have to wait that long for another On to Richmond campaign update. We're going to be back next week to shed some light on what preparations the Confederates were making to deal with this massive invasion.
As the first federal ships began unloading troops here at Fort Monroe, the Confederate general in charge of the peninsula had less than 10,000 men on hand. And if you want to talk about people who deserve more credit, this guy really takes the cake. We'll see you then.